And 4 minutes later, everything was different. A decision that no one in Camilla's inner circle thought could truly be made was presented to the monarch within a closed royal council meeting. The title of Queen Consort, which Camilla had battled for years to obtain, was legally bestowed upon Catherine. The most unsettling part, however, was when the decision's wording was read aloud a few seconds later. Before anyone in the room could respond, Camilla abruptly passed out her face, losing all of its color. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates before we delve further into what this actually implies for the royal family. When the first page was opened, Camilla remained motionless. She sat stiffly next to Charles, waiting for the expected interruption, but the king said nothing. There was more weight in that stillness than in any words. In this dramatized story, the sovereign was advised on constitutional and ceremonial concerns by the Royal Council, which accepted a royal settlement that gave Catherine the title of Queen Consort. The written structure that provided the story's decision-making power was the settlement, and its significance was clear. Camilla was losing the position she had spent years fighting. As the words went on, Catherine lowered her gaze. She didn't go forward, smile, or display victory. William kept a close eye on her and realized why. She was being elevated through the humiliation of another woman, and there was no clear way to keep the two apart. Camilla continued to stare at Charles across the table, looking for signs of resistance on his face. He didn't give her any. The monarch's hands remained motionless, and her self-assurance seemed to erode with each passing moment. The clerk then came to the final phrase. Camilla's fingers gripped the table's edge more tightly. She attempted to get up by pushing back her chair, but she abruptly lost her equilibrium. The stillness in the room gave way to confusion as aides approached her. Catherine stayed by William's side, shaken by the human cost of what had just been revealed, while Charles stood a few steps away, clearly bewildered. Then William noticed a notation close to the bottom of the document. Prior to the meeting that morning, the transfer was ready. This was not an abrupt vote that resulted from a disagreement in the room. The decision had already been made when Camilla showed up thinking she could reverse it. She turned to face Charles once as assistants guided her to the door. When the king heard her charge, the question of why Catherine had been raised was no longer the only one. Her voice was faint, but the words fell with deadly clarity. You knew. It was how Camilla's closest friends and family had led her into that room because that she was safe. Although the council altered a title, 3 connections centered around the same crown were really destroyed. Charles had to deal with the one consequence that no royal document could lessen the knowledge that his wife thought he had deserted her. Camilla witnessed humiliation, and Catherine felt the horrifying weight of an honor she had never expected to receive in this manner. 3 persons stood behind the titles, each staring at the identical choice and experiencing a completely different form of grief. For years, Camilla has thought the title of Queen Consort meant more than just ceremonial status. She saw it as evidence that the protracted years of disagreement, rejection, and public opposition had now culminated in acceptance, because it demonstrated to the nation that she had not only survived royal life, but had been formally accepted within it. Her standing next to the king carried symbolic weight. Therefore, losing that spot so quickly touched on something far more profound than protocol. Catherine had the opposite kind of pressure. She had always known that William would eventually face more responsibilities. However, she had envisioned that change coming gradually, rather than by the collapse of another lady in a secret side room. She murmured cautiously as she turned to face the prince. She didn't want her promotion to be associated with Camilla's demise. After listening, William responded that rejecting the choice now would lead to another catastrophe, implying discord within a family that is already experiencing extreme stress. When Charles went into the quiet room where Camilla was recuperating, he carried the most difficult conversation by himself. She refrained from grabbing him. Instead, she turned to face the window. He moved in closer and extended his hand, but she withdrew hers. The king paused before asking, "Why didn't you tell me?" He then acknowledged that he had known a change of position was being discussed in a private conversation that was later recorded for the palace record inside this theatrical account. But he stated that the final phrase that instantly transferred the title had not been disclosed to him. Camilla gave him a wounded, incredulous look in return. It didn't seem to matter if he knew every detail now. Even while he was aware that danger was approaching, he allowed her to enter that room unprepared. Later that night, William confronted Catherine once more with something even more concerning. After looking over the council dossier, which was the official compilation of briefing papers used to justify the decision, he found that there had been growing opposition to Camilla's continued authority for months. This had been gradually developing behind closed doors. It had not started that morning. Then Catherine noticed a detail. Multiple objections had the same date next to them. Nearly no one outside the inner home was aware that it was part of a secret Windsor ceremony that had turned tense. The story must go back to the point where a peaceful argument ceased to be private and became the catalyst for Camilla's demise, in order to comprehend why the palace was so afraid of that date. Every royal crisis has a moment that seems unimportant until it comes up again in history. 3 months prior, during a private ceremonial rehearsal at Windsor Castle, that moment occurred. There were no public announcements, no applauding crowds, and no cameras. Only William, Camilla, Catherine, and a contentious directive about the crown's destiny. The council would eventually cite what transpired during those brief private moments as the lone incident to defend everything. Camilla went into the rehearsal with the expectation that one thing would not change her position next to the crown. The purpose of the private meeting was to establish ceremonial precedents for upcoming state events and to determine who would be responsible for certain tasks in the event that royal duties abruptly changed. To put it simply, ceremonial precedents dictate who stands where, enters when, and represents the monarchy at significant events. Alongside William, Catherine's responsibilities were already increasing. However, the Queen Consort thought that development would occur under, rather than under her current power. Then the order arrived. Catherine was told to step aside from her role as the formation's chief consort by Camilla. William responded right away when she said, "There can only be one queen beside the crown." Her tone remained composed, but the intention was clear. Before the discussion could proceed, he contested the directive, claiming that Catherine's future obligations were already represented in the agreed arrangement. Because ceremonial roles frequently indicate how authority is expected to pass from one generation to the next, the prince saw that this had an impact on the succession itself, rather than just where someone stood during a rehearsal. The embarrassment was already present when Catherine discreetly requested him not to escalate. In front of senior home employees, she had been corrected and made to appear as though her position had been purposefully diminished. When the rehearsal was over, the argument did not go away. Because Camilla's command had changed an established succession protocol that is a formally accepted arrangement for how royal duties would pass. During a transition, the ceremony secretary produced a written statement. Every significant element, including William's protest and Catherine's effort to defuse the situation, was captured in that document. That night, Charles got the account. He secretly revoked Camilla's order and put Catherine back in her old position, according to the documented palace record cited in this dramatized story. However, the monarch decided against confronting his wife in public. Silence, he thought, would limit the harm. Rather, it was buried by silence. Camilla assumed the dispute was resolved and ignored the written record as administrative paperwork. The same document reappeared in the council dossier many months later. What she had dismissed as a small argument turned into proof that the planned succession of the monarchy was at odds with her own authority. She became enraged with Catherine after realizing it. However, a queen consort could not be removed by paperwork alone. When Camilla addressed Catherine directly and wanted to know if she had assisted in the decision's engineering, that would be the genuine rupture. Now Camilla and Catherine stood a few feet apart in a secluded palace parlor, each bearing the weight of a title that only one of them could hold. There were no council clerks, counselors, or carefully prepared declarations between them. For hours, Camilla had thought Catherine had been waiting in silence for this. Catherine had dreaded the charge throughout those same hours. Then the door shut. Camilla turned to face her, and the palace's dreaded confrontation finally started. After recuperating from the breakdown, Camilla had personally asked for the meeting, but she had stipulated one requirement: no employees, no assistants, and no communications sent through third parties. She had a direct desire for the truth. Catherine concurred since she was aware of the issues that went beyond the title. A traumatic transfer could become a permanent family rift if resentment persisted. The rival families and secret rumors. Without wasting any time, Camilla asked, "Did you know they were giving you my title?" Catherine met her eyes. She said that although she was aware that changes were being considered, she was unaware that the council would be transferring the post that morning. The Queen Consort was not much calmed by her response. She was accused by Camilla of being silent, while years of criticism accumulated around her, and then profiting at the very moment that pressure finally materialized. Catherine's self-control hardened. She informed Camilla that she had never requested to be raised by the humiliation of another woman. There was no celebration behind the words, so they landed hard. Catherine had witnessed the breakdown. Charles had frozen in front of her. In that moment, she had realized that any authority associated with the title would always be connected to the manner in which it had been appropriated from another person. Then Catherine disclosed something Camilla had not anticipated. She had pushed William to advocate a delay in a private conversation prior to the council meeting. She was concerned that an instant transfer would appear more like punishment than a lawful constitutional amendment. Although neither of them had the last say, the prince had listened. Camilla's rage changed. Catherine was not the most powerful factor behind the transfer if she had attempted to slow it down. Then who wanted this? Catherine stopped before responding. Ask the people who signed it. The Queen Consort moved forward and posed the question that all of a sudden weighed more than all the accusations that had come before it. The response altered the atmosphere in the room. Afterward, Camilla looked at the authorization page and identified a few individuals. She had anticipated seeing them. Her gaze then paused. Charles. Beneath the settlement was his signature. If the monarch had approved the settlement, the true conflict would never have included two women. Thus that signature turned her rage into something colder. It had taken place within the crown's machinery. Catherine could be challenged by Camilla. She could put William to the test. She could challenge advisors, fire courtiers, and denounce the council that had humiliated her. However, a single signature completely altered the power dynamics. The instrument had been approved by Charles, not with great enthusiasm, not without reluctance, but clearly. And Camilla realized that the decision had crossed the one line she though could never be crossed when she eventually saw his name beneath the transfer. The crown had been selected over her by her husband. Charles was fully aware of the significance of that signature. Regardless of whether he accepted it or not, the sovereign was ultimately responsible because the royal settlement could not be implemented without his consent. Hi viewers, are you shocked that King Charles secretly signed the decree to strip Camilla of her title, choosing the survival of the monarchy over his own wife? Yes or no? Put yes in the comments if you believe Charles made the right yet brutal decision. For weeks he had opposed an instant transfer because he was worried about the monarchy's structure and the harm it would do to his wife. Resistance, however, has its limits. Delay started to seem more like self-defense than caution once the council presented him with the entire evidence. After the meeting, The king reviewed the signed page once again while sitting by himself with the file. He took off his spectacles, set them next to the document, and remained silent. Unwilling to disturb the quiet, a senior assistant stood a few feet away. Finally, Charles acknowledged that if he seemed prepared to maintain Camilla's position in the face of mounting constitutional challenges, preserving her forever would lead to a more serious issue. One could argue that his duties as king was subordinated to his allegiance as a husband. The dispute within the council had extended much beyond the conflict at Windsor. As William's future role grew, Catherine had already begun taking on more ceremonial pressure, carrying more public responsibilities, and supporting him. While its formal framework remained stuck behind it, members that the monarchy was operating as if the next phase had already started. That inconsistency was simply brought to light by the Windsor episode in a way that was impossible to ignore. One choice William had made for himself. He declined to personally call for Camilla's dismissal. The prince was aware that any such request may give the impression that the transfer was the result of a son pressuring his father's wife for his own benefit. Rather, he let Charles make the final decision. The king's simplest justification was eliminated by that decision. Camilla realized almost instantly how awful that truth was. The result had not been pushed by Catherine. There had been no ultimatum from William. Charles had given the case life, but the council had constructed it, and everything else started to move after he signed the title. By the next morning, the decision was more than just words on a sheet. It was altering doors, staff assignments, timetables, and the day-to-day reality of Camilla's royal life. The most brutal aspect did not appear in the council chamber. Rather, it was revealed the next morning, through subtle adjustments that were hard to overlook. There was no longer a briefing folder. Camilla's schedule no longer included a ceremonial meeting. Employees who had previously awaited her guidance were now reporting to a different office. There was no spectacular shouting. Nobody shut the door. However, the same message grew more difficult to ignore. With each subtle change, the title was lost, and the palace had already started to function without her. Before anyone could explain the missing folder, Camilla spotted it. Her daily regimen had always included the morning council briefing, which included updates on impending obligations, patronages, and ceremonial activities. It was gone now. These specifics were important because royal influence was not limited to titles. It also existed in staff precedence schedules access and the subtle power to influence future events. She asked an assistant where the folder was, and she received a quiet response. At first, the Queen Consort remained silent. She seemed to recognize that the transfer was already taking place in dozens of tiny ways as she turned to face the unfinished breakfast tray. Meetings were redistributed, instructions for staff members were modified, patronage briefings started to relocate. What had previously come naturally to her position was now being rearranged to fit someone else. She was still seated when Charles later came in. Camilla sliced through his uncertainty as he attempted to speak softly. Before she even realized what had happened, she informed the king that the palace had successfully erased years of labor. She shook her head when he said that her charity endeavors will continue. That wasn't the intention. She was surrounded by a structure that had transformed overnight, and no assurance could make that feel fleeting. Then a surprising message showed up. Camilla used to have a private office, but Catherine had refused to move in. Until the Queen Consort made a decision, she told employees to leave all personal belongings precisely where they were. For the first time since the council meeting, Camilla's fury subsided after learning of the outcome through a domestic helper. Catherine was not acting in a triumphant manner. She was nearly as horrified by that knowledge as by the actual move. It meant that there was no longer a straightforward adversary on the opposing side of the struggle. By nightfall, Camilla came to her own conclusion. In a brief handwritten note, she asked Catherine to get together once more. No advisors, no officials, no Charles. The conflict eventually changed from a struggle over status to something far more human when the two ladies reconnected without the support of the council. Camilla didn't come seeking for someone to blame this time. Catherine was unprepared to defend herself when she entered, because neither woman could hide behind the wrath that had characterized their initial encounter. It had burnt down into something quieter and more frightening. There were no royal documents between them, nor were there any assistants present. For the first time since the council's ruling, the woman who inherited the title and the previous bearer spoke as two individuals rather than as symbols. Anger had stopped responding to Camilla, so she had asked for the meeting. Attacking Catherine would not mend the rift between her and Charles, nor would it undo the settlement. Catherine showed respect for that by coming by herself. No employees stood by to deliver messages. There were no prepared remarks between them. What followed would not be another piece of palace machinery, but rather a private discussion. Camilla was the first to speak. Although she acknowledged that losing the title had hurt her, it wasn't the most severe pain. Entering the council chamber with the belief that Charles would protect her, and seeing that the decision had already transcended their marriage, was what had really shattered something inside of her. Once the king had stood for the last location where she could still be protected by her own allegiance, that conviction had vanished. Without interjecting, Catherine listened. Then she presented her own truth. It had not seemed like a victory to be hired. It had been like taking on responsibility by way of another person's suffering. She was aware that every appearance she made in the future would be evaluated in relation to Camilla's collapse, and that every accomplishment could be seen as evidence that one woman had succeeded because another had failed. Would Catherine take everything? Camilla finally voiced the topic she had been thinking about since the morning. The years she had spent serving alongside Charles were still connected to charities, causes, and personal work. Catherine responded right away. No. She clarified that institutional succession did not necessitate personal erasure. Rather, it referred to the official transfer of royal responsibility from one individual to another. Catherine had no intention of turning transition into punishment, and Camilla could carry on the causes that had become an integral part of her identity. Something was altered by the response. Camilla reached for a handwritten collection of intimate letters she had made over her years in the position before departing. They included cautions, demands, and quick lessons that could not be explained by an official briefing. Without any fanfare, she gave them to Catherine. It was an acceptance that the transfer would stand, not a surrender. And now that a private accord had been achieved, the palace could proceed. Behind closed doors, the family had discovered a tenuous calm. However, Britain was only just learning about what had transpired outside the palace walls. The private dilemma was the world's by dawn. Newspaper editors ripped apart completed front pages, phones lit up, and broadcasters abandoned planned programs. What had started out as a private council decision was suddenly seen as a ruling on two royal women and the monarchy's future course. However, out of thousands of headlines, one picture Catherine entering the castle, while Camilla's car silently left through a different gate, captured the moment more potently than any commentary. Soon after, the official proclamation from Buckingham Palace confirmed that Catherine had taken on the role of Queen Consort as part of a broader royal shift. Although the phrase had a controlled sound, it had a huge significance. This was not a short-term change. The title had changed. The monarchy was officially recognizing a move that had already affected life behind palace doors, and the ceremonial balance had shifted. William remained silent as he watched the initial television news with Catherine. The prince heard commentator after commentator call her ascension a win, but he was aware of how strongly she disagreed with that description. Celebrating Camilla's passing, Catherine had not taken on the new job. Every headline about her ascent would also reopen the tale of another woman's collapse she had known going into it. In privacy, Camilla watched the same coverage. She didn't lose her cool until one of the presenters called her time with Charles An era abruptly closed. The word hit more forcefully than anticipated. She had already come to terms with the fact that the championship would not come back. However, the loss felt more public than it ever had in the council chamber when her tenure in the position was described as a completed chapter. Millions of people were talking about what had previously been the domain of personal grief. The day outside Victoria Station was then defined by a single front page. Photographs of Catherine entering Buckingham Palace and Camilla departing earlier that day were placed side by side beneath two big words across the top of a special evening edition that read, "A New Queen." It was a harsh contrast. It seemed as though one woman was heading toward the epicenter of royal life, while the other was heading away from it. The atmosphere was equally polarized outside the palace. Behind the gates, crowds gathered. Some held pictures of Catherine, while others publicly expressed their condolences for Camilla. Excitement coexisted with unease. Britain was not witnessing a straightforward festivity. It was seeing the public collision of succession, loss, ambition duty, and family suffering. They made one last appearance inside the palace. After the transfer of title and the nation's response, there was only one thing left. When the family stood together thereafter, they had to demonstrate what the decision truly meant. Ultimately, there was no turning back, no last-minute action. There was no secret provision giving the title back to the lost woman. Catherine continued to serve as Queen Consort. When the two could no longer be equally safeguarded, Charles was left to bear the consequences of choosing monarchy above marriage, and Camilla acknowledged that her chapter in that position had ended. However, the council document did not contain the crisis's ultimate meaning. It showed up in each person's subsequent decisions. Camilla was the first to realize that the transfer was final. While the former Queen Consort continued to have well-defined charity and familial responsibilities, without the title she had once thought completed her royal trip, the palace affirmed Catherine's position permanently. This distinction was important because it made it possible for her to carry on with her work even after her constitutional post terminated. Charles confirmed that his signature had been a deliberate decision rather than an act of momentary pressure by not attempting to undo the deal. Prior to the family's first public appearance, after the news, the monarch had a private meeting with Camilla. He acknowledged that he should have told her how serious the council's deliberations had grown and expressed regret for letting duty morph into concealment. She listened in silence before responding with the reality that had plagued the entire situation. It had hurt to lose the title, but it had hurt far more to learn that he had been reluctant to inform her what was about to happen. Charles just accepted that as he was powerless to stop it. Soon later, Catherine went up to Camilla without the triumph that onlookers had associated with her ascent. There were no advisors between the two women as they stood together. Almost immediately, Camilla straightened Catherine's sleeve after noticing a tiny fold in it. Catherine gently praised her, saying, "Carry it better than I did." There was neither a dramatic hug nor an abrupt revision of the events that had taken place. The gesture had a deeper meaning. Without pretending the grief had subsided, both women had come to terms with the transfer's reality. As he saw them get ready to move on together, William realized the broader significance. It dawned on the prince that this had never really been about switching out one woman for another. Before events necessitated a more severe transition, the monarchy had hastened its next generation. Catherine was under pressure now that she was in a position of power. Not every aspect of Camilla's life had been destroyed, but she had lost her rank. Furthermore, Charles had maintained the monarchy at a personal expense that he would never be able to fully recover. Catherine received the title from the council, but nobody emerged victorious. One woman gave up the job she had battled for years to obtain. Another took on a load shaped like a crown that she was unable to put off. And a king learned that sometimes defending the monarchy necessitates enduring the scars left by the decision. The transfer was finished. The crown had made a decision about its destiny, and the previous chapter was finished. Hi viewers, if you deeply respect Catherine for accepting the heavy burden of the Queen Consort title with pure grace, and without a single moment of triumph over Camilla, put yes in the comments. Like this video, share it, and subscribe right now. Anyone who admires how Catherine showed true royal dignity in the face of this historic transition, but leaves without subscribing, is failing to give our future queen the public backing she truly deserves. Sati 24. Let's show the world what true royalty looks like. Hit that subscribe button right now to show your unwavering support.